7:30. Guys good?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. Kick this off. I'm sure committee member Mr. Braden will come here in a second. The agenda, for those of you that can't see it, we're first going to talk about our top line. So that's revenue estimates, and our treasurer's here, thankfully, came to kind of give us an overview of the process, some of the highlights about what comprises our top line, and then if there's areas where you want to mix it in or mix in your relationship to the FRP, and then particularly around RETA. I thought that would be super useful for us to learn. It was in our audit report anyway, right. So I think it's incredibly appropriate this year specifically to talk about that. I think that'll segue fairly nicely to a discussion between committee members on the FRP process itself for 2020. We can kind of just discuss, I think briefly, but it's, a better word would be simply, I suppose, on what to expect, some of the timing and key marks that we are going to be working towards, and I have a little bit of a calendar we can chat through, and just general discussion about how that will look in the coming 5 weeks, which is kind of the critical time to work towards submission, if we can approve it. Then we have 3 claims listed on the agenda. There's been an additional one that was brought to our attention. I think we wanted to talk about it. So we'll go through these 3 claims. Our assistant law director briefed a little bit on some of the history, so we can talk through that. But mostly they're on there to also discuss process. I think we left the 2 finance committees kind of talking about how we want to think about creating a better rigor or a better process, if that means creating thresholds, gates, fence gates between them. We'll kind of discuss kind of how we're going to handle claims in the future. Council, the 4th item, council did ask that we review and discuss the salary ranges and new position ordinance that was brought forth on January 1st. We can touch on that. I can do a little bit of a spoiler alert and say that we're not going to be able to do too much until after that plan is presented to us, because we haven't seen it at this point. And then we'll discuss any new business. Cool. So with that, you want to take us on our guest speaker for the night, for the revenue?
A tour of the revenue?
Yes, please.
So I'll give you some overall numbers, and since you're all number guys, and we'll talk about that, and then we'll talk about what makes up those numbers and what we see and how we go about looking at what we think it's going to be in 2020 and years into the future. Cool. So 2019 was another great year for us. The collections were $19.6 million. That's the most they've ever been. And that is, let's see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years in a row we've been able to increase collections. Certainly some people like to say, well, that is just inflation and things like that. But going back to 2010 and looking at all the inflation rates, this far outstrips any kind of inflation that you want to apply. Okay. And we do that. But typically I talk about the top line. So the amount of money coming in, $19.8 million. In 2018 it was 19.6. In 2017 it was 18.6. So we've made, the city has made big strides. Mm-hmm. The numbers really come from 3 different places. And what we track, three different places, and that is individual returns, companies' net profit returns, and then withholding for the companies located here in the city. Withholding tax, the 2% earning tax, applies to all 3. So the individuals are people that live, so Norwood, again, the law changed some 10 years ago or so to where Norwood is a mandatory filing city. Before that, we weren't. And that says that all citizens need to file a return whether you owe anything or not. Whether you're retired or not, you owe us a return. And so individuals that live in the city but work outside the city, that in a municipality that doesn't get 2%, it's less than 2% deducted, well, they owe where they work their 1.5% or whatever, and they would owe us up to the 2% threshold. So for the year, out of our 19.8 million, we collected 1.3 million dollars in that type or that category of earnings tax. So 1.3 out of the 19.8. Those are also people that have their own home business or things like that owe taxes. The second is net profit tax. So on their taxable income, Norwood companies and Norwood businesses owe us 2% earnings tax on their net profit. And again, it's taxable profit. And so we typically collect about double the individual there. So about $2.5 million of the 19.8 million were collected through the net profit tax. Which leaves the third and the biggest bucket, and where we spend most of our time, and that is businesses located in Norwood that withhold 2% earnings tax from their employees. And so that in 2019, that was $16.1 million out of our 19.8. So 16.1 million out of our 19.8 comes from Norwood companies. And that is 81% of our taxes collected come from withholding from Norwood companies. That's a couple of ticks higher than it usually is, but going back all the way back to 2005, it's usually in the high 70s, but the last 3 years, it's been real close to 80%, or in this case, 81%. That's why encouraging economic development and bringing business to the city is so important for our city. You know, there are some cities out there, Wyoming and places like that, they don't rely on industry or withholding tax hardly at all. But we're the opposite, right? We rely on that. So it's really, if you're looking at it from the very narrow perspective of earnings tax collection, which we do down there most of the time, we want a bunch of doctors, we want a bunch of engineers, we want a bunch of people making a lot of money. That's good for earnings tax for the city. Now, there are other reasons you have, a lot of different businesses, but just looking at it from that narrow perspective, 81% of our total tax collection is withholding tax. It's very, very important. And so when we look to the future then,
Yep,
lay it on me.
Yeah. So, do you feel that oftentimes I've seen some emails, they're going around talking about how 2% might not be encouraging businesses that would have employees that would fall into that because they may live in places that are far below the 2%.
Right.
Do you see that as a problem? Or do you see this as something that's just part and parcel, and that's just going to be ultimately good for Norwood having the money to fund the services and all the increased services that we want to be looking through 2025?
Right. So I'm quickly looking at my notes here. I don't know where I put it. So there are in Ohio, here locally, there are 3 cities that have earnings tax higher than ours, and that's Cincinnati at 2.1, Laughlin and St. Bernard all have 2.1. All places, especially Laughlin and St. Bernard, right, heavy industry, and pretty similar going back 10, 20, 30, 40 years, 50 years to where Norwood was, right? Lots of industry, and everybody relied on that. We're in the next group at 2%, and there's maybe a half a dozen cities at 2%, and then there's probably 20 cities that have something less than that. Okay. We typically, we meaning Norwood's government, economic development folks, we always use the 2% as a positive. Hey, you don't pay as much as if you located to Cincinnati. Because over and over, that's been our biggest competition over the years, right? And so we have felt need something, to keep it just a tick below Cincinnati. If nothing else, just to be able to say that, to say, hey, look, we're cheaper than Cincinnati. Earnings tax is only charged by cities. So if you're a township or a village, or you don't charge earnings tax unless there's some other rules. These JEDs and things like that are created here in the last couple of years to let township charge some earnings tax. But it used to be how cities were funded. So I think we should feel pretty comfortable at the 2%. We've lost some development over the years. For instance, the FBI headquarters that's out by Kenwood. I'd have bet you my house that was coming to Norwood. I worked 20 months on that deal. I had numerous meetings with people from Washington, D.C. We were sure that was coming to Norwood. And they went out to, I guess that's Sycamore Township, because there was no earnings tax. Now, in the end,
At the time.
they have to pay some now because the law has changed since they located out there. That's really the only one of any consequence that I remember over my 20-some years here. And I've not been involved in everything, but that we've lost really because of that.
And it sounded like that really it's competition versus other cities, making that distinction between cities and those who don't pay any earnings tax. It's kind of like you shouldn't really make that comparison because they're not apples to apples.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. So that's about the only time. And again, we've hit pretty hard where hey, look, say what you want, but we're cheaper than Cincinnati.
Right.
So we've been able to use that to our advantage, the 2%.
Thanks for the comment. Cool.
So that's a good thing, I think. Anything else right now?
That was it.
Okay. So because most of our taxes come from companies, when forecasting earnings tax, we look at companies, industry, businesses pretty hard and try to determine what's going to happen next year or the following year. And we look at 4 different things, and I'll go into a little bit of detail. By the time we're done with this, you'll want me to leave. But so the 4 things we look at is we certainly review the previous year for any extraordinary items. So, it's nice to say, oh, we collected X amount this year. We're going to at least collect that amount this year or more, when something might have happened in the previous year. And I'll give you some examples here in a minute. So we look at the previous year for any extraordinary items. We also then have discussions with and analyze our top 50 companies. Our top 50 companies out of that 16 million, they contributed almost $11 million out of that 16 million in withholding tax, our top 50 companies. And so, that's 2/3 of what we collect is from 50 companies, and the last third is from hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of companies that are here in Norwood, believe it or not. So those top 50 are pretty important, and so I'll talk to you about what we do when we analyze those. We also have pretty deep discussions with the building department these days. Used to be the economic development department, and those folks, along with the building department, and we try to look and talk about Norwood's future in a short time frame here. What's going to happen this year, next year, and what does the building department know? And then just general economic conditions. What's out there? Is there a recession that's coming up? Is there this? Is there that? What's the economy supposed to do? And what do all the smart people tell us that, hey, here's the U.S. economy is going to do this? And so we find some comfort then in that. So those are kind of the four things we look at when we're doing a forecast. And so I thought I'd spend a couple of minutes with each of those and kind of talk about that process. So, when we look at 2019 to 2020, I'm pretty happy to say that 2019 there were no extraordinary items. And that was different than in 2017 to 2018. So in the tax year 2018, there was a federal tax law changed that had a huge effect on employee stock option plans. And so, as James remembers, towards the end of 18, we got over $1 million from companies whose employees cashed out their stock options right in December before the end of the year. And so that gave us a big jump in 18 over 17, The year before that, it just so happened there were a lot of companies, or at least some of our bigger companies, they had great years. So they paid their employees a lot of bonus money, much more than typically happened. If you go back a few years before that, in 2014, that's when Paycor came and started that. Before that, we had years where MedPace left, or Zumbio left, or US Playing Card left. Those things affected us a lot in those years. Mm-hmm. And in a couple of those years I mentioned, our earnings tax from one year to the next was down 11-12%. So we took a huge hit, in those years. But in 19, there were none of those things. And it was just a very, very solid year for all of our companies. Or most of our companies. If you look at the top 50, 36 of those 50 paid more taxes in 19 than 18, but still 14 were a little bit less. So there wasn't anything major in 2019 that we can't count on for 2020. So that makes us feel pretty good. Yeah. And I think that should give you guys some comfort when you're putting together the budget, that's a good thing. Again, digging a little deeper into the top 50 paying companies, when I say those 50 companies withheld taxes of $10.9 million, that's over $500 million in payroll from those top 50 companies. That's $547 million worth of payroll. So 2% of that's right at 10.9, and so we talked to some of those folks and we asked them, what's your hiring situation in 2020? What kind of overtime are you going to work your folks? You have a lot of orders, you don't have any orders. You're going to keep your second shift, you're going to keep your third shift. All that counts for us. So we want the Siemens of the world and the Paycors of the world and those folks to hire a bunch of people. Are they going to give raises this year? All those things matter. Again, and we're only looking at the narrow, are we going to collect a bunch of money or not, right? Earnings tax. So that's all we're looking at it from that perspective. And again, when we look at those top 50, no big changes. Some companies, over the years, they're like, we got enough orders through the first quarter, and then I don't know what the heck we're going to do, Or we've already told our employees all overtime's going to be cut this year. Things like that would make, make a decent change to what we collect. And again, there's been no negative feedback. Nobody said they're going to be hiring 1,000 people. But there were some reports back that said, we think we're going to increase our number of employees, and we feel confident, and those kinds of discussions. And so, again, that should give us some comfort. Yeah. The third place I talked about was our discussions with the building department. And they're usually one of the first to know, hey, who's leaving? Oh, this company, I heard from their security guy or this guy or that guy that they're building a new place out in Mason that's going to be finished in the middle of the summer, and they're going to start transferring people. Mm-hmm. So our building department usually knows what's up. Any major tenants leaving us. Quite frankly, if it's a tenant somewhere over in the Rookwood side, they fill up pretty quick. So usually that might be a little bump for a couple of months, but usually no long-term hurt. And they do change tenants over there. There's, not only stores, which all those stores bring very little earnings tax to us. I like them. I like the restaurants. But from an earnings tax perspective, those 1 or 2 office towers bring 3 or 4 times as much as the rest of the place in earnings tax for us. My daughter, the waitress over there, makes very little, and that's what we tax her on, right? That kind of stuff. Is anybody relocating, to Norwood? Last year we continued. TriHealth kind of came online, and they brought some of their people to the facility over here, but some of us were scattered in Norwood, already. And so, TriHealth opened up their big facility over here, but it really didn't. I mean, it was up, but no big deal. Things like that. Are there any new large tenants? Is there going to be any new construction? What's going on at Playing Card? And are we going to get any money for that? What's going on at the Terex site over here by the football stadium? What do you guys in the building department here? What kind of permits do you think we're going to issue? Those kinds of things. What about the Quality Hotel here? What about Paycor? And are they going to build their second building this year or not? What about Xavier? Are they done with their construction in Norwood, or they still got a little bit to go? So all of those places, we're going to get some construction money. We're going to get some earnings tax in 2020 from some of those folks, but I've not put anything in for any of those places. It's not going to be, if you add them all up, it's probably not going to be $100,000 this year. So we'll see a little bit more, but until those places are really built and filled, we're not going to get earnings tax of any consequence from any of those places. So that's why we go to the building department. What do you hear bad? What do you hear good? Let's talk about this stuff. Cool. Right? James?
Yeah, I was just a question on the top 50. So, like Xavier University, so they just built their new Health United building, and as part of that building, I think they're going to have like a whole bunch of professors that their offices are going to be there. There's classrooms in that building, right? So I guess they've had one other classroom building, the nursing and art building or whatever that is, right in the center of the parking lot, for Centos Center. But this new one's going to have the stuff as well. So are we making sure that Xavier, that they're coding that correctly, that we're getting, I don't know if we get earnings tax based on where the professors' offices are or where they're teaching their classes. I'm not sure how that works. But
it's usually where they're teaching their classes.
So I guess
yes, we follow up with Xavier all the time about what's in Norwood, what's not in Norwood, what offices, what classes, those kinds of things. So they build the big hub and the cool looking basketball courts and the swimming pool and stuff like that. Yeah, we don't make any money. We don't make any earnings tax off of that, right? The couple of kids they got to watch, you don't make any money off of those. And again, just the earnings tax perspective, right? But when professors and when the college and not the student apartments, that does nothing for us, over there by Starbucks and all of those kinds of things. those things don't do anything. They don't move the needle a little bit, you know. But when they start having classes and things like that, yeah, so they'll pay Norwood taxes and not Cincinnati taxes.
That's helpful.
Okay.
And I've got two more questions. The other one is, so I work from home. For full-time job, I work from home. So my company, actually, they're a very responsible company in the sense that they send my earnings tax directly to the treasurer's office. So even though they don't have an office in Norwood, they've got a big, they've got the ability to do that. So I was just curious, does that go in the net or the withholding tax, the portion, if they do that?
If you make quarterly payments, it goes into withholding. So.
Gotcha. Are there a lot of companies
Should I look to see if you're in the top 50?
Well, I'm sure that my company's not. I'm sure there's like 10 of us, if that, here. But no, I was just curious about that. And then the other one is TriHealth. CDK Global. So they have an incentive agreement like with us, and I'd heard, and I don't know if you've heard anything, but I'd heard that their performance with that agreement hasn't been as stellar as like they had promised originally. And that they were potentially looking not to get some of the incentives that they would have had. Have you heard anything about that, or do you have any information on that?
No. Quite frankly, the agreements that we've signed with Paycor, CDK, and
I Square Foot.
Those agreements are all based on payroll level. Negotiated at the time, and then Paycor's came, was it last year, 19 or 18, when it came in front of you guys again for some additional work on the agreement. So when I started in here in the late 90s, they had a very similar agreement with Cincinnati Bell. Only that agreement was based on head count and kind of fixed assets and how much money are you going to put into your business, which was very typical on how the agreements between cities and businesses happened back then. That's been the biggest change in my 20 years, is how that changed. It's all about payroll dollars now, because we don't know whether we're going to hire 10 people that make $1 million a year or 300 people that make $100,000 a year. Here's the payroll level. And there's very little verbiage about, well, you got to create this many jobs and you got to spend this much money in fixed assets, because the Ohio personal property tax went away. So that's not a big deal in Ohio anymore. It's all about payroll dollars. And usually the threshold, while it grows in most agreements, I'm going to say probably all the agreements, the three that we have now, no other companies have any kind of agreements at all, zero. Those three companies, and I could tell you those three companies that James just mentioned, they're all in the top 6 or 7 or 8 of our top 50 companies. So they're very healthy companies, and they contribute a lot to Norwood's bottom line. There's been no other companies ever to get another agreement. There's no other companies right now that have any tax agreements. There's been lots of companies that tried, which I don't blame them. Hey, if we move to Norwood, we want some kind of agreements. And previous administrations, with an S, they've said no to those folks. And so it's whatever the administrations and council feels comfortable at the time to say, yeah, we'll give you some kind of community investment agreement, basically some money back based on how much you contribute as a company in earnings tax to us. We'll give you half back if you're Paycor. We'll give you a quarter back, 25% of what you pay in back if you're CDK or I Square Foot. That's what it is. And still with those numbers, they're some of the leading companies we have, even when you subtract all those numbers out. So I've not heard anything about CDK. Typically what happens is, and that's why you'll see the cash build up, is that when they make their monthly earnings tax payments to the city, if it's just Paycor, we take half of that and put it into Star, Ohio. Because they pay that whole year, And then we have August till August of the following year before we cut the check. And so we'll cut the check in August of 2020 for their portion that they get back for the tax year 2019. The reason there's 8 months is they have to do some work on their side, and we have to audit what they do. So that number changes. They have people that travel and work out of the city, so they don't end up paying Norwood tax on those folks, and all those kinds of things. And so back and forth, the way the agreement reads is, okay, we know that there's going to be some months where we're going to have to agree, and that's part of what Chuck Barlow does as tax commissioner. He gets with these companies, and everybody audits each other. This is what we owe you, then we cut a big check. So you'll see pretty healthy cash balances now. If you look at that Fund 89, I don't remember, is that what it is, Fund 89? You'll see like a big cash balance and those building up over the months, more and more and more and more and more, and then in August it'll go down. You'll be like, what the heck happened? Well, it's because we paid some of that money we owed. Okay, so that's how it works. Those are the only 3 companies. If there is some clawback in all of that, right? So that's in all the agreements. So if they don't start meeting some of the thresholds, they won't get as much money back as what we return to them. So again, it kind of increases every year, if I remember right, and they have to meet those thresholds, or they don't get any money back. And it's just those 3.
Another question for the, as it relates to the plan. This is going to sound, at risk of being overly obvious, all the items that you've been talking about here, your big 3, and then how they're made up, that flows into the mayor's plan, right? They basically, it's not them making the estimates from 2020 to 2025. They're looking to you to provide those line items.
For the FRP and stuff?
Yeah.
Yes, that's correct. So we've always worked very closely with April and Anna Mary and the staff at the state of Ohio.
Yep.
But again, limited to here's the revenue and here's what we think. And then when they want to talk about the budgets for 610 and 620, the tax department, the treasury department, which is very little really. But we have the same discussions as the fire department has with them, and what's your personnel costs going to be? What are your supplies? That kind of stuff. It's a lot less money, but we still have that conversation. So that's our interaction with the state, is always on the revenue side. Last thing then is general economic conditions. And if you look at what is out there by the federal government these days, the GDP was up about 2.2% in 2019, and they expect it to be up about 2% in 2020. They say, a recession is unlikely, and if it happens, it'll happen towards the end of the year, which might not or shouldn't affect us in 2020 that much. And really, when you look at all the writing that's out there and the projections and all that, they talk about. They don't talk about things like a housing crisis or anything like that. It's all about international economic issues and how that's going to affect the stock market thing. And if you paid attention today, with the coronavirus stuff, more bad news about that. The Dow was down over 1,000 points today. The biggest one-day reduction in a couple of years, if I remember right, about 3.5%. It lost value today. So, if you looked at my portfolio, you could care less what I have to say about that here, but my personal. But again, who knows where that's going? Is that going to drive us towards some recession or anything like that? We're in a good position in that we have a wide variety of industry in Norwood these days. So that kind of softens the blow sometime, right? But, when companies don't work their hours and people quit going to the doctors, And so that does affect some of our healthcare stuff. They lay off a little bit. They don't make as much money as they did. So, it's kind of a vicious circle, right? And so even though we have lots of different industries, businesses, all that would affect us if it turns south. But for 2020, I don't think we have any issues there.
And I wonder, like, when you're thinking about your projections, because so much of this is just based on income, like your earnings tax and your income. In my mind, even if something were to happen, there's such a lag, maybe a year, maybe even 2 years before the average worker actually sees their paycheck go down.
Right.
Because these are, as you said, these are macro company level issues that get worked out, and before they start making layoff decisions or payroll reduction decisions or overtime decisions, maybe the latter is nearer term, but this happens over 2+ years.
Right.
And so how do you bake in the pluses and the minuses in your projections? Well, I don't know what's going to happen, so what risk factor do I put on that?
Right, and so it is true, we don't know what's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
If we could predict when there's a recession, I say this all the time, none of us would be in this room. We'd be on some island in the Caribbean or something, because we'd be a lot smarter and a lot richer, right? We could project that. So you just do the best you can, you talk to our businesses, and over the years, again, the business have said, our backlog is really short, and starting in the summer, we're going to be laying people off, or we're not going to work a third shift anymore, or we've cut back all our overtime. Those are the things that really affect us right away. And so longer term, it's really hard for us to project, and so we usually don't. We try to stay pretty conservative. It's not my money, it's all of our money. And so we've always tried to, project some conservatism in all of our estimates. I said we were up about 1% in 19 from 18, right? So just about $200,000, right? 1% of 20 million would be $100,000. $200,000, I'm sorry. And but we didn't get to match 2018 to like December 17th or December 18th. So I'd encourage you guys, when you're looking at the monthly reports and things like that, look at it for the long term. What's going to happen all 12 months this year? So we might have a great February or a great March, and you'll be like, oh my God, we're up 6%. We should put probably best to look at this through the whole year, and it would be great to be up 6% by the time we get to the end. But we're usually pretty cautious on what we do when we give you guys some numbers. I'd love to be cautious and say we're going to be up 6%, but I'm going to say we're going to be up about 1%, and then it's up to you guys to decide what you want to use. But so again, in review, we look at previous years for extraordinary items. We kind of analyze and reach out to a lot of companies in our top 50. We talk to the building department, talk about businesses leaving or businesses coming, and then we kind of look at the general economy and see what's out there in the literature and what the prognosticators are telling us. And with that, then we make some hopefully educated guess as to where we think we're going to be. And then the auditor and counsel, and now another layer with the FRP, that can be adjusted. Again, just because I think, hey, look, put in another couple of 100,000 this year from our 19.8, let's make it 200. You might say, you know what? I think it's best to be the same, the 19.8. And that, just because I say it doesn't mean you have to use that. I give you my best guess, and then it's up to you guys to make it work, or the mayor to make it work, whatever you guys think. There's nothing that says, oh, the treasurer thinks that, so that's what goes into the plan. It could be, and in a lot of years it is, but doesn't have to be. you might want to be more bullish than a couple of 100,000. You might go say, oh heck, we'll be up 500,000. Put that in the budget. That's up to you guys, right? So the other things I got is just to talk about the tax department, the treasurer's office, and kind of staffing and some quick budget notes there, and then maybe talk about Rita a little bit.
Yeah, I think the people would really like to hear about that.
And what that is, and that sound good?
Yes, please.
All right, so I'll continue then. In the tax department and the treasurer's office, it's 2 keys. I think it's 610 and 620. Is that right, James? 0610 and 0620. I think those are the two keys for the tax department and the treasurer's office. Again, going back some years, when I started, I think there were 8 or 9 people in the tax department full time, and 3 people on the treasury side full time. Where we are today is me and Chuck Barlow, whose official title is tax commissioner, but in order to save the city some money, early in his career as tax commissioner, after John Hanrahan retired, I asked him to take over the deputy treasurer spot, kind of like what Marcus does for Jim as deputy auditor. So I had a deputy treasurer and a tax commissioner. We combined those 2 jobs, and so that's one position now. And so Chuck, as tax commissioner, does all the day-to-day treasury stuff too, which is really on a day-to-day basis. It's moving some money around, and it's a lot of banking. And so he does that. In the tax department, then we have 2 clerks. Both are union clerks, and so what they do every day is answer the phone, typically from angry people. You usually don't call the tax department unless you have an issue, unfortunately. Not always. And so Ava and Kim are our 2 tax clerks. Again, they're the City Hall union. Those are 2 union positions. And they enter and audit tax returns all day. It's you really have to like what you're doing to do something like that all day. And both of them do a fine job. It'll be, Kim is fairly new and been there less than a year, and so this will be her first busy season, which usually starts around the 1st of March and it goes for about 60 days into May. Is beginning of March through the middle of May is there's a lot of work to be done. First half of the year, we collect a little over 53% of that year's taxes. The back half, about 47%. Excuse me. And it's weird how consistent that number is over the years. So, by the time we get to the end of June, we should have a decent feel for where we're going to be. And so, on the Treasury side, there's nobody there. And so, over the years, we went from 3 full-time people to 2, down to 1, and that person left to go work for Cintas as an accounts payable clerk for almost $5 more an hour. And so we lost that person. Since that time, we've really struggled, quite frankly, more about politics than the job. I was running for office, and that's an appointed position, and if I lost as treasurer, that person would have left their job and started, and then potentially would not have had a job. This last time, we all know I ran for another position, and people were worried that if I did win, happened to the appointed people. And so it was really hard to get somebody to quit their job to come in to work 8 months if I was leaving, right? Mm-hmm. And so what we tried to do is backfill that as we tried to turn it into, at first we tried to turn it into a union position and give up one of the tax clerk positions and kind of flip-flop jobs with the union. There were a lot of people, the union was all for that, a lot of people were for that. That didn't turn out the way we wanted it. And so we went the part-time route and just paid somebody to come in and whatever amount of hours she could work. We paid her like $15 an hour, no benefits, something like that. Her mother was ill, so she got to a point where she had to take care of her mom, and so left us, and we've not filled that position yet. And so what I hope to see in the budget this time is just a return to the normal low-level clerk, but full-time with benefits, that kind of stuff. The positions need it. There's a lot of work to be done, and we have all worked in offices where your time could be spent more efficiently on other things, right? So somebody comes in to buy a yard sign permit or something like that. One of my 2 union tax clerks or Chuck has to wait on that person. Well, while they're waiting on the person, they're not doing any tax stuff, you know? And so, you know, you think that we're barely above water. You know, our nose is like this, right? You know, and we're just kind of treading water. There's some other things we can do, and so, you know, what I'm hoping and what I need to advocate for is to return that position to a normally funded, whatever the low-level clerk's position is. It usually follows the union pay scale, you know. I have to tell you, there's nobody waiting in the wings right now. Like, this gets passed, and hopefully it's good, and they'll be hired the next day. But I did last week start putting out, hey, there could be an opening in the treasurer's office. We're going to work hard to get that done. You know, start thinking about, you know, just get the word out there, and hopefully we'll get somebody qualified to do that. So, you know, when you guys as a committee get into that side of the budget, if we need to talk again, I certainly have job descriptions and all that, and what the duties are, and all that's all done. So if we want to get into that detail, if that's what you want to do, that sounds good to me. You know, James, do you have a question?
It's okay. Yes, so thanks.
Oh, definitely.
Okay, appreciate that. So I just looking at right now the current fiscal recovery plan. So basically, like when we get the copy of the new one, I'm going to go through like line by line and just see what the changes are, just as a first thing. So right now for Treasurer's Office Personnel Services, we have for 2020, so this should be the appropriations for this year, $54,300. And then for contractual services, $62,900. So it's $117,000 total. Do you know, does that include your deputy or the clerk right now, or will there need to be a different amount for the treasurer's office?
No idea.
Okay.
You know, again, when you add the 2 groups up, I think Chuck Barlow and the 2 union clerks are in the personnel key on the tax side. And I think my salary and the other clerk would be on the treasury side.
Yeah.
So if you're looking at the detail, you know, I think my salary is what, like 24 grand or
something
like that.
Yeah.
23 grand, 24 grand.
And then what about the contractual services for that? And it could be that I forgot. I know that. Yeah. Well, I guess yeah. Is that something? Do you have contractual employees on the treasurer side, or
we don't?
Okay.
We don't. So the last one worked. Deanna worked the first quarter of last year. So again, you know,
it feels like then that you would that the money would. We'll see if what the plan says.
Yeah.
But that feels like the intent of the 2019 mindset was to either fill that contractually or use that same pot for that hire.
Yeah,
It feels like the
Yeah.
intent of the 2019.
Yeah, and if you could
It's-
just check, yeah, I mean, if you too, like, if you could just, I mean, check on that and maybe send Eric and I an email and just like, hey, like, this is the
I
number.
know Chuck and Anna Mary have been looking at that.
Okay.
So, but I don't want to speak now because I don't know exactly where they are.
Understood.
You know, but I'll follow up.
Okay.
Good point.
And I'll send you some more stuff. You know, the contractual amount, the big part of that in 19 was Deanna that worked the first quarter. And so this is typically what we face in the tax. So she worked for the auditor office a lot of years. She worked for us a lot of years. A lot of tax experience. And so she goes to be the tax commissioner of Marima. It's closer to her house. It's more flexible hours. And it's almost $8 more an hour. How can you tell her no? Full benefits?
Well,
How
yeah,
can you
and
tell her no?
I was gonna say, and if it's the tax commissioner, I mean, it sounds like it was a promotion, you know.
Yeah. So again, you know, I know last year when we were trying to make some changes, we were out, you know, and for the exact low-level tax clerk job, City of Cincinnati was paying almost $4 more an hour. The same exact job is where we were. You know, we were unsuccessful in hiring somebody. So there's a lot of competition out there. We just have to convince people why it's good to work for us, and we're prepared to do that. I'm not asking to meet anybody else's other than what you guys have set up as the salary ranges already, you know, or if you're going to change those. I'll work with what's ever in there. But it's hard to pay a low-level clerk $12 an hour these days, you know, or $12.50 an hour. It's hard to get somebody like that. I'll follow up on the budget and provide you guys some more detail on the budget. Certainly, I'll talk to Chuck tomorrow and see what they've done so far, and we'll pass that on. Something else? No. So the last thing is my 10 minutes up.
Oh, this Rita, I'm doubly interested.
He's been ready
in,
for. That's why you saved it for the end, because.
No. I don't have a whole lot to say about to Rita, and so other than my experience is in my professional career that Rita does a fine job collecting taxes and passing them on less a certain fee.
Can we get a bit of background
To
on
the
Rita
city.
for everyone?
My background?
No, a bit of background on Rita for people
Yeah,
watching.
so Rita is a private company, has nothing to do with the government. It's a private for-profit company, regional income tax agency, I think is what Rita stands for. And their shtick is we will help you collect earnings tax and other taxes, but mainly earnings tax in the state of Ohio these days. And for a fee, we'll collect that and we'll kick your portion back to the city. And you can reduce your expenses and net make more money. Is that good enough?
There was a fly on me. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought you had another question. It was the old fly. So that's their business. And again, in my professional career, we've paid things through Rita and things like it. It seemed to work fine, you know. So I'm not one to say they give poor service or anything like that. I'm really not. I don't know what they charge these days. So some things we need to look at is if they've got a fee based on the dollars we collect, right? And they charge 2% or 3% or something like that. When you add the tax and the treasurer's office together for 2019, that cost was 1.5% of earnings tax collected. If you look, the previous year was 1.7. There have been years where the earnings tax and treasurer's department together, right, has been around 3%, 3.1% back in 2015 of the amount collected. But I think that bang for our buck, just looking at dollars and cents, the costs to the city of Norwood, we can do it a lot cheaper in-house. A couple of other things that we need to consider. One is the overwhelming majority of our money comes from companies, and it's like clockwork. They send in their weekly, their monthly, their quarterly amount. It's rarely wrong. You know, that they just don't make a lot of mistakes, and so when there is an error and we catch that, it's easily correctable. And so there's not a lot of work done for those companies that are here, and that's the biggest portion of our tax. And so that's almost like giving them free money, almost, right? And so when we've looked at this in years past, I guess before I move on, and if we do reduce costs, it's really going to be staff costs. You know, there'll be some paper cost and things like that, but not a whole lot. But it's going to be staff, so you'd be probably laying off a couple of union clerks is what you're talking about doing. If that's where we want to make the cut, if you're going to reduce our cost and put that burden on them, and then net we make more money. I mean, we're all about making more money. I totally get that, you know. But those would be the cup. You only have a couple of people to choose from on the tax side, right? And so we would still have to have some presence here. The other thing that we lose is kind of the customer service of, you know, somebody comes in here and says, I've got a question about this letter you sent me, or I've got a question about do I pay taxes on this, or can you help me fill out my taxes? Here's my federal form that one of the local tax preparers did, but where do I put this on your form? That kind of stuff, you know. You lose all that for the citizens, or they have to call or go up to Columbus, and somebody there may or may not help them. So there has been over the years, clearly the cost of the tax and treasurer's office, it wasn't close to what we would pay Rita to get this done. Sometimes when we've looked at it, it's been very close. But it's the whole service side that kind of won out, that said, no, that's something we should keep in-house to get done.
And when you say it's very close, you're saying the incremental
savings was nothing.
And if they're nothing, then do you see, when you looked at it in the past, did you give any credit to the fact that there's some 19%, you said 81% was the top category, then you've got the 19% in the bottom. Are you anticipating them to get a big chunk of incremental revenue out of that base?
So
or are you saying that that's included in the net?
No. So the 81% is withholding tax. Another 13.5% is the net profit. So remember I said that's about double the individual, right? So about 13% is the net profit. So here's my federal tax return. Here's what's due locally, and we work with those numbers.
I just imagine that the 19% is where they could get some more squeeze out of it.
Not probably there, but individuals. So, you know, we don't have a big staff. So whether you have a business at home, whether it's childcare, whether it's fixing cars in your driveway, whether you have a restaurant and you don't pay full taxes on everything you take in, you know what? If you have a home-based business and you're not filing taxes for your federal return or your state return, yeah, we're not going to catch you. We're not going to catch you. You know, the way people get on our tax rolls is the state of Ohio sends us information as to here's everybody in Norwood that filed a state return. So we kind of look to see if you filed a return here. We look when you open up a new water account, whether you're a business or an individual. we get that information. When there is a change, like the landlord over at Rookwood, again, when there's a change, they tell us, this restaurant moved out, this restaurant moved in. These guys moved out, these guys moved in, you know. Over the years, not so much in the last 10 years, but over the years, someplace like Rookwood where the company is not sure, so they might send their taxes to Cincinnati, we get all that money. Cincinnati calls us all back, or when we look into it, like, you know, who are these guys? Well, we've been sending it to Cincinnati. And so Cincinnati, you know, they got to file and get a refund and pay us and all that kind of stuff. But net, I'm pretty confident that everybody pays their fair share. Now, I'm as confident there are people out there that don't pay us anything, and they should. You know, but you know, we could get the police department to go track them down or something. But there's nobody locally. So, you know, if Rita has some people that do nothing but try to track down people that owe us money, we might get some there. Not at a 13.5%, we won't increase there, and none of the 81%.
You're saying it's the bottom,
but that individual stuff, I think there's a chance we can pick up. Those are the things that I say, you know, with the amount of staff you have now, you're kind of treading water. Those are the things you can't do internally just because there's no time to do that. You know, and you know, when somebody says they're mad at their neighbor, and we get a phone call or a letter or an email that says so and so that next to me fixes cars in their side yard, and I talk to them all the time over a beer, and they claim they don't pay any taxes to Norwood. Well, a good portion of the time they do. They're just giving it to the neighbor. Heck, I don't pay any tax, you know, that kind of stuff. But if they don't, and we hear about it that way, that's another way where they'll get a letter, and we'll start following up with those folks too.
So, one of the things, I guess, the IRS, right? So we all are supposed to file our federal tax returns. So they do information sharing with states and some municipalities. There's like things that you have to to do security-wise and such. I was hoping you could, and I'm sure that Rita participates with that, just knowing how many 300 or something municipalities that go with them. What would we have to do in Norwood in order to participate in that? Have we looked into that?
So to participate in the federal side, I don't know. And again, the way we participate with the state is just an exchange of information. It's usually the state pushing down their information that says, hey, look. Now, that's usually at least a year old, right? So we could have just got like the 18 information. Like, hey, here's everybody in the city of Norwood that filed a state return. So we don't have any of that information from the federal government. And honestly, James, I don't know what it would take to get that information.
Well, I didn't think about the state part of it. So if you've got the information from the state, and I'm guessing, and so we're using that to.
We are.
Okay.
But nothing with the federal government.
Right. Well, I'm sure it probably would be close to the same. So yeah, that makes sense. Cool. That's all I.
Yeah, there's lots of things like that we could get into, but it always comes down to manpower and costs.
And then I had another question around. It seemed like you were saying that because they would have to insert, I don't know, a person, two people from Rita, that in order to make that net, it just naturally means you'd have to cut one or two from the staff. If from that 9% we're squeezing enough juice out that offsets the need to cut, is there a world where you just incrementally add Rita to your base, and now you're continuing to provide better service because you're no longer here, you're shredding. I mean, isn't that a world where...
Yeah, I think we can look at that.
Yeah. I think that's the lens at which you can see me kind of sitting up straight and super interested, because I'm trying to work, I'm trying to rationalize that path.
Again, the only caution to the wind is when you look at the, let's see, 93, when you look at the 93.7% of the taxes collected were from businesses, we're not getting a lot of, we're not going to get a lot out of that, I don't think, from Rita. But the opportunity, and again, the percent of, you know, the 6.5% or so, which are individuals, that's what we collect, and that's correct, right? They pay their 2%. Now, sometimes, you know, it's back and forth, and I mean, if you come up here to Mayor's Court, Tim knows we cite people to Mayor's Court all the time for tax issues, you know. So what we're missing is their investigative powers of people out there that don't pay their fair share, right? And again, that's the mantra we live by there. You know, if you owe us $100, I want my $100. If you owe me $300,000, I want my $300,000. Everybody, just, I don't want $101. I want my $100. That's it. Let's everybody pay their fair share, right?
Yeah, obviously, yes. I'm kind of less interested in chasing unless the monetary reward was there. But just in that 6%, I think there is. I wasn't part of it looking back a few years ago. From going, that's $1.5 million. 1% of that, you know, that's $13,000 more dollars. That's, and then you start saying, if I can get to that 10% mark, and I don't know if we is, but if we can look at other cities and say,
Absolutely.
what do you really feel like you're going to get out of this? And if that hits the 10% level,
Well, we'll see what
then
they have in their
more
sales pitch, right?
You've nailed it.
You know, what do they, you know, the processing costs on the business side is pretty darn low for us right now, right? It's the missed opportunity or the opportunity cost of people that aren't paying. Can they help us with that?
Yeah, no,
You know,
so it's
can we help?
we're not going to do it unless
No,
A, we're making
again.
more money, and B, if we can keep customer service high while doing that, it seems like a no-brainer. But I'm interested in putting a very intentional, like, idea, an intentional like platform for them to. I want them to come tell us about that stuff, and I'm hoping and asking that when myself, the administration, hopefully you can kind of be in a position where we're welcoming that conversation. It's really just
I saw some
it's
stuff.
gonna be a good idea.
You know, Kenny Ray sent me some stuff. I'm sorry, President of Council Miracle sent me some stuff that Victor and them have been talking. Victor and Rita have been talking. I got some copies of that stuff. So I appreciate the administrative's help on collecting taxes. It's a good place for him to start.
It was just in the audit report. I think that's where it came out. So that's why it's kind of top of mind for the past couple weeks. So.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks.
That's all I got. We good?
More than. I appreciate you coming out and good suggestion. I mean, I think it's really good in the first kind of couple months for people to be
sometimes I get criticized and sometimes not, but you know, my whole idea is, hey, look, if I'm the treasurer, I'm going to do treasurer stuff. And if you guys want me to come to a council meeting, which I've been to lots and lots over the years, or if you guys want me to come to something like that, I'm good for all of that. But if there's not something you want to know from me, I'm not going to stand in your way, and I'm out, you know. And so that's kind of how we work things. And so if we need Chuck to be here, he'd be here at a meeting, you know. If you want me, or hey, let's talk about this, or what do you think about that? I'm good with all of that.
Yeah, this was more of just a learning session, which you've more than done for us. So genuinely appreciate it.
I told you guys be ready to throw me out by the time this was over.
Nah.
I said that at the beginning. All right, we're good?
Great,
All right,
thank you.
guys, Thanks.
Cool. A little bit of a gear change, but not too much. It segues, and this is just going to be pretty quick because I do want to hit into the claims and give enough time for Mr. Gary, who did come. But I wanted to kind of just have a discussion and an overview, as I said, around what we can expect for the next 5 weeks around the FRP. I've written down a little bit of a timeline, and this is very much going to be, I need you just to chime in if you agree, want to hear more, disagree, if you see something that we should be adding or something like that, or be thinking about. This is the this is a good way for us to just go through the next 5-6 weeks. So today we're here at Finance Committee, and we're kind of thinking through all our inputs around the FRP. I know myself, I know you have been meeting with as many people as you can to try to understand some of the assumptions without seeing the plan that that we hope to kind of see in it. And it kind of gives us a framework to have our goals. I'm going to have my goals, you're going to have your goals. All of us council members are going to have particular goals that we want to see in the administration's plan, so that when we kind of come to the readings and the votes, we're voting based on, well, how is that ticked, 80% of my boxes or something like that to make a satisfactory and appropriate plan. So tomorrow we're going to have a council meeting, and I think on the agenda you can see that there's going to be from the mayor a request for an executive session around collective bargaining. That's particularly important because it's a huge part of the plan. I think it's not just something from a dollars perspective, but it's also just something that has been an item that we really want to make sure is at the forefront of our understanding when we approve it. So I think it's a smart move for us, and it's great that the mayor would come in and try to allow for us to kind of get a really good understanding of where he sees himself at with some of the collective bargaining items that are with our city. So that'll happen tomorrow. And then on March 10th, we, the council, are going to receive the FRP. And there's talk of a little bit of a clock starts. We'll get into that in here in just a second. But the point being is that's when we, council, will be looking at the FRP for the first time. And we'll be able to see kind of three major things. One, the plan itself and understanding, his top line, and then where we end up on the bottom line. I have particular numbers that I want to see at the bottom of every year, and I'm sure we have something else in there. But the point being, we'll be able to see where we're ending up, and that's kind of the first phase. How are we ending each year? Then you would dig in that a little deeper and look at the assumptions list, which is about 4 pages when you look at 2019, and it has things like some operating cost assumptions, the personnel that are assumed to be in some of those line items, and those are kind of the things that we're going to say, well, has that hit or not hit the things that we're looking to see? So that'd be kind of like gate number 2, I suppose. Then there'd be a third gate, which is really something that's kind of was born out of, I think 3 years ago or 2 years ago when you made the capital improvement plan for the first time. Was that 3 years ago?
No, it was last year.
Last year.
The first
Okay.
Year. We didn't have any way to we had no money to do one before that. So.
Okay. Well, I think the third gate that we should all be putting paying a particular attention to after March 10th is that capital improvement plan. Beyond the operating line items and beyond the personnel, which there's going to be a level of it is what it is with some of that. The capital improvements plan feels very far away from that. This is something where most of that budget is going to be laid out from 2020 to 2025. Some of the big items that each of us as council members want to see or have goals that we've been talking to different departments on, this is the opportunity to look at that. How does that look? And the reason that that's important is because the capital improvement plan does get submitted with the plan on April 7th. Or on March 26th. I'll get to that.
Yeah, and one item I'll note on there is that so since it is a 5-year plan, it also includes the current year that we're in, so it'd be 2020 to 2024. Just so you know.
Sorry.
No, just
well said.
Yep.
The other thing to remind, and I think you did last year on TV and Finance Committee, was that it is a guideline. But I think what's different for us this year and into the next year or two is we want that to be a pretty solid indication of our strategy. Mm-hmm. Rather than it being, and I know it was just out of circumstance last year, rather than it being something, here's just the art of possible, I think that this is something that the administration, I hope, and us, I need, as council members for that March 10th to March 24th time period, we should be evaluating that very clearly and closely to say, have we line items some of the major things that you want to see in there? doesn't have the same binding elements that the plan itself does, because it is guidelines, but it is a clear message to department heads, to the administration, of what we want to see. And so I think that's just kind of like you've seen something like this before. Yes, it is guidelines, but make it, for council people, let's make it part of our strategy.
Yeah, and I'll say, just to comment on the guidelines, and yes, the administration they did not have to follow the capital improvements plan, but I would say that council, we talked about it from January till March of that year when we passed the final plan, and it was, the intentions of everything that was in there was that we wanted it done. I think I did mention to you more guidelines when we talked about the street fund. The street fund, we had some just various streets listed, but it was more of the possibility, more to help people visualize, but it wasn't an official street plan, or like, these are the streets that we have to do. I mean, Indian Mound would not have been the first street that we would have wanted tackled, right? So it is a street that's going to get done, but so anyways, just want to make sure to note that we wanted it done too, and I think this year I agree with your strategy that we want to be watching this every month whenever we meet and see what's gotten done, what's not going to get done.
Yeah, you've nailed the last point, which was it's also going to be our metric. It's just going to be something that we can grade ourselves on progress. If we need to make an adjustment, or something's not moving fast enough for a very good reason, then where we make the adjustments rather than the ideation. But yeah, good. Thanks for clarifying.
Yeah.
So that's March 10th. We have between March 10th and March 24th and I think it might warrant a special meeting just to kind of make sure that we're not waiting until the 24th to vote on it. We'll see kind of how that flows, what the plan looks like. Without seeing it, it's hard for us to say we're very far away or very, very close. We'll find out, I suppose.
Yeah, and I would just note too on that. So the ability for us to amend the plan that's presented to us is somewhat limited by the willingness of the state and of the city auditor to support us in actually making the changes and willing to let us represent it to council. And I only say that because, there's been instances in the past where we might have wanted some small changes, and I've heard it said from not somebody that's at the city, but somebody elsewhere, that it's not council's job to micromanage the plan. It was kind of shocked me a little bit just to hear it phrased that way. And sure, if we're looking to have another $10,000 added here, we probably should say, let's just trust in what's there and let's, recommend the changes next year. But, if there is some systemic stuff that we want to see changed, then, I just want to make sure that you're working with the auditor and that, everybody's on board to see it change, because I'd hate for, Mr. Kelch to, suggest these changes and, we all be on board just to be told, oh no, you're not going to change it. We're not going to let you change it. And, I've seen stuff like that before, and it's extremely frustrating. So just want to give you a heads up on that.
Yeah, and you kind of did offline before we came in here. You kind of mentioned that in passing, and I think it was good that you did that. Kind of say, well, you want to make sure you kind of are checking in with folks. And I think what's good so far is I have had enough conversations with some of the department heads, our auditor and mayor, to make sure that strategically where we're at is we're sort of making sense. I haven't seen the plan. I'm not supposed to. But exactly the other element I think I'm taking from this is I need to be making sure that there aren't a whole lot of surprises on March 24th. And maybe that means having a forum for people to kind of express big misses in their strategy, which is why I kind of floated that special meeting. Maybe that's the forum where you kind of say, you know what? It's not a $10,000 number. There is a $200,000 miss here. I like how you worded that. I want to know about that before the 24th. Mm-hmm. So that's why we'll see what the plan is, and there might be cause for us to have a special meeting to kind of voice some of those discussions before the 24th. So sure. It's a great point, and let's see what it looks like.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
yep.
24th, I already said it. That's when we're going to have a second and a third reading. 99.9, we're going to have a vote to pass the plan. We'll assume that either amendments were raised or they weren't needed, and we'll just find that out. But the March 24th is when we council will likely have that vote. If we vote to pass it, the mayor will submit that to the state on the 26th. The next council meeting after that would be April 7th. That's when we'd have probably two things happen. I would raise an ordinance with appropriations to plus or minus that which is in there to the plan, to match the plan rather. And then I think that we would probably re-raise the ordinance that we saw on January 1st and every council meeting subsequent to that for the salary ranges and positions, if they're baked into the plan. I know the mayor said he was probably going to do something like that. I know Jim said he was going to do something like that, so I expect to see it. But that's just kind of where, and then that would be the appropriate time to have, I'd have to check if we're at readings again or if we would vote on that at that point, but I'd find out. And it's kind of I'm forgetting even know what reading we're even on right now because we've seen that ordinance so many
I
times.
think that's where we're gonna have to line item and make sure we got what we want where we want it.
For sure, yeah.
That.
And that's why it likely wouldn't be a vote as much as maybe we'd have readings to make sure where the heck we're even at. Because
Yeah.
I don't even know if it's clear anymore to folks. So those are the two things we'd likely see on April 7th. That was a lot of dates and a lot of time. That's kind of where I just wanted to lay out for us, for other council members watching, for folks on TV, the timeline that we're operating in. And when we talk about the plan, that's what we're talking about.
So what you were talking about, like the mayor submits on March 26th, and we're hoping it gets approved by April 7th, or
I mean, the state would probably already see a lot of what's going in, so I imagine they're doing a review pretty soon after submission. But I don't actually know. I'll find that out. It's a good point. I don't actually know when that would happen.
The FRP meeting, the financial meeting they had, and I remember saying something like 10 days or something, but I'm not sure exactly.
So are you saying the question?
I think. Sorry. Why don't you say your question so I don't misinterpret?
So like for the state, for them to approve the FRP themselves.
After the so mayor submits it on the 26th.
Yeah.
I think your question was, when do we know if they've rubber stamped?
Yeah.
But they would. Okay, so they will. The state will have, or at least the financial supervisors will have given their blessing before it gets presented to council, and then if council passes it, then it will get presented to the Financial Recovery Commission. Well, as long as we pass what the mayor presents. If there was some substantive change, they might have to re-review it. But they would essentially on the commission meeting on the 31st, March 31st. That's when the commission will approve it. And I mean, if everything's as good as I hope it will be, then there shouldn't be a whole lot of issues there once council approves our part.
Cool. All right. I mean, there's nothing more I kind of wanted to get out of it other than to kind of give a timeline and then I suppose encourage council members who aren't, not us three, I suppose, but encourage them to. Now is the time to start, if you haven't already, meeting with residents, department heads, any other stakeholder, and start making the goals that you're wanting to see. Also, I encourage you to have a conversation with people that are putting those assumptions in and kind of make it known ahead of time so there isn't, we're just trying to remove surprises. I want to minimize the amount of that happens on after March the 10th. And I think there's a way to do that, and it's just creating your goals and making, as council members, making any drafters aware of, kind of where your head's at. So that's that. Okay. Now we're going to completely switch gears again and talk about some of these claims that came in. On the agenda were 3 different claims. One was actually rescinding a claim. But I think right before the meeting started, we got in this case, a 4th claim that was presented to us. But I invited Tim Gary, who was nice enough to join. He's kind of looked at some of these claims, and I wanted to try to get 2 things out of this. The first was a review of these particular claims, of which we have a copy, and then get Mr. Gary, if you could comment on some of the history that you've seen going through there, or at least whatever you have, or background, by way of background. And then the other thing I want to do after we kind of review these claims is to try to talk a little bit more about a process that might suit council for handling, or this committee for handling claims in the future. I don't know, we kind of briefly touched on maybe creating a threshold, dollar threshold, or maybe only certain claims or cases were raised to council. We're trying to create some gates there too, which might not only just be more effective, but also more efficient. Okay. So, Tim, this is really just to kind of ask if you could give us a brief synopsis of the claims, and we can kind of discuss them freely as council about what, if anything, we would like to do about that. Does that make sense?
Sure. There's
Cool.
one claim that's not listed, that's made by a law student at UC named Ben Rands. He's made a claim. He believes that the public works vehicle was responsible for some damage to his pickup truck in the amount of about $1,530. Mr. Rands is like I said, a law student, plenty busy. We invited him to the end of November claims meeting. We invited him to the December 10th claims meeting, which was during his finals, and I invited him by email last Friday.
To this.
Yeah, to this, and I haven't seen him. I think it's a pretty speculative claim. He didn't see the damage caused. The public works people deny that they caused any damage, and at this point, I don't see that there's any rationale for going forward with that one. I mean, I'd love to have him come in and present if he thinks he can, establish a claim. My impression is that he can't.
Okay.
But I just wanted to alert the committee to that claim. But I try to take a look at these claims as realistic, or I've tried to take a look at these claims as realistically as possible. And the majority of them, for better or for worse, I don't think have merit as a practical matter, because the city's not placed on notice of the potholes that have been, struck, for example, like this, the Kelly McCarter claim.
Yeah.
On a Monday night, I think it was, she hit some pothole along Montgomery Road, going northbound in the curb lane, she said. That had not been reported, that pothole had not been reported to Public Works before she hit it. She reported it the next morning, and I think she reported it to Public Works, who then sent her over to me. I tried to figure out where the pothole occurred, and she said it was around Stones Lane. Public Works sent a crew down there, they didn't find it. Then she said it was maybe around Clenny, and they sent a crew down there and they didn't find it. And they were looking both directions, but this was northbound curb lane. And then they found a pothole on Montgomery at Mentor, which is still further north, and they filled it that day. I don't see how that ought to be, I don't see how the city ought to pay for that, And I understand people are not happy about hitting potholes. The thing to do probably is to slow down and look, rather than drive faster than the speed limit frequently up Montgomery Road, for example.
Yeah. I think it's particularly important. I know when we were talking, this was about a month ago when we had the second finance committee, and you were explaining kind of a little bit about that notice concept.
Right.
And I think
that's the key.
That seems like the crux of almost 90% of the claims that comes in is, from a legal standpoint, I just might say it back to you, without having notice, which is calling, then telling Public Works about it, and them having in a reasonable amount of time to do something about that. We'll call it a day or two or something like this. Without that time or those steps taking place, it's hard to have any recourse because that otherwise. And I think
we can't guarantee everybody's driving within the city. We've got, I think, at least 60 miles of roads, and that doesn't consider lane miles. It's just 60 miles of roads or thereabouts, or streets. And we just can't guarantee everybody's driving. You know, I've lived here for 27 years, and I think I've had some flat tires and so on, but I've never filed any claim for pothole or anything like that. I did have an actual blowout underneath the Baltimore and Ohio bridge that was in Cincinnati, but, you know, part of it's just the hazard of driving, and hazard of driving down at that point Highland.
Now, we do have,
You know,
a lot of potholes in Norwood, and we're
there's-
figuring out a way to kind of address that. But I think one thing would be to probably improve, and that's whether it's through us, and I know Public Works and the mayor are trying to think through that, but improve the way that we allow for notice to be given. So right now, the process as I see it is, because Clint and John, to the safety service director and the head of Public Works, just want you to call them, and notice would be by phone or leaving a voicemail that they have committed to checking regularly, and regularly at this point has been daily. So that's the route that we're taking right now, and I think that we heard the mayor twice and safety service director once talk about this work order system, and they think that's supposed to replace the kind of probably slower, maybe archaic way of just calling and hoping that it gets answered. The work order system allows you to check status of that. And I think the knock-on effect is allowing for, from a legal perspective, for us to have that evidence. And so there's almost two levels of benefit that comes from that, and it allows us to really feel confident about demonstrating notice, both from the residents and from the law department. So I just wanted to kind of that's kind of something I was thinking about heading into this meeting.
well, the new claim that I think you were referring to was Kevin Ross's claim.
Yeah, that was on the email here.
and-
I don't have, you don't have a copy of this. This was emailed.
I think I might have made a copy of that, but
Yeah, I didn't get it, but I have it on email. But yeah, keep going.
in any event, Mr. Ross, I think on Wednesday about 3:45 was driving, he says, what amounts to southeast bound on Smith at around Floral. And he said that he struck a pothole in the left-hand lane, and that is I think his wheel was bent and his tire blown of a Mercedes that he was driving. And so he called the next day right around noon. And my first call, I took his information. My first call was to the Public Works Department to say, here's this reported pothole. Has it been reported before? And if it hasn't, would you get a crew out to fix it? And I was told by Public Works that we've got a crew out now in that area. We have been told about potholes in the curb lane. We weren't told about any in the left-hand lane. And it's not my habit to sugarcoat this sort of thing when people call. I'll say, I'm not sure that there's been any notice before your call. And if there hasn't, you may not get your claim allowed. And so he's not, I don't know. I sent him an email the day that he called, like maybe 50 minutes after he called, transmitting, the claim form and telling him what I had done, and that the claim had been reported first by him, and that it was to be fixed that day. Okay, that was last Thursday, I think. He actually came in. I left work at about noon on Friday to take a trip to St. Louis for my daughter's college stuff, and he came in after that, and T.A. Brown, who helps with the secretarial work, gave him the form, gave him a copy of the email, and he filled it out and slipped it under the council's door with his insurance card and his bill, if you will. But, so that's that one. There's another one called Dana Hogan,
Yep.
which apparently occurred on January the 9th, was filed on January the 10th, and this was a damage for a her tire apparently struck some excavation by a non-city contractor and I don't even know who the contractor is, frankly, but it was probably somebody related to MSD or the telephone company or somebody that had made a hole in the pavement and not filled it after they made it. And this was on Smith, basically right around the area where you turn into the parking garage, I think, between Sherman and Wall Street, as I understand it. And that pointed out another challenge, and that is, I guess, that the previous administration hadn't required contractors to get permits for cutting into the street and pavement and that kind of stuff, and the current ordinances allow for that. And so we've encouraged that those current ordinances be followed and that we get permits so that we know at least who's working on the street when, who the actual contractors are, etc. So it points out a problem, but again, city didn't have notice of this this problem, and I'm here to serve, but I think that our duty is to handle these things fiscally responsibly, and if there's been notice and not have a remedy, that's one thing. But if there hasn't been, I don't think that these claims have merit. And put them into, I don't want to put them all into the same basket, but you look at each of them on their own, and I do think that a systematic reporting, including work orders, is a great idea, and we just have to be fair to people, of course.
Yeah,
and we have to be fair to the city too.
Yeah, part of the review, in my mind, and I'm really encouraging kind of hear your thoughts too, guys, but I'm balancing appreciating that it's not great out there, and we're working through that, and we're driving the same streets, and actually just like 2 weeks ago, I think I said something like, man, I bet I'm taking a year's life off my car driving a particular street near my house.
Mm-hmm.
That said, the review of these claims is you've kind of provided guidance in the same way that I imagine I would be thinking about this is what's the legal action or liability that we feel we as the city should be holding to.
Yeah, to me, on one hand, it's a bummer because it's like, man, you're driving down the street, it's our streets when you blew your tire, but at the other hand, it's like, not saying that everybody would want to do this, but I feel like if we don't follow it this way, what's to stop anybody that needs a new set of tires from finding a nice little pothole and just running over it and then calling us and reporting it?
I don't believe that's the case for any of these people.
No, I'm not saying it is. I'm just saying if we don't handle it this way, like, hey, report it first.
Right. Sure.
And if it's reported and we neglected to do our job as a city to
and we've had a few of those. We have.
Yeah.
But they're few and far between, I think.
Yeah.
Unless, they're few and far between, I think, put it that way.
Yeah.
And I drive around Cincinnati as well as Norwood, and I was in St. Louis this weekend. There's plenty of potholes in every community. Mm-hmm. There are. You just have to be careful, and if anything, drive the speed limit or maybe even a little less. The challenge is that if people are cooking up Montgomery Road at 40 or 45 miles an hour, they're more likely to hit something. And that hit is going to likely be harder, I think, than if, I tend to, particularly on the really rough streets, tend to kind of pick my way around, and so that I'm not hitting stuff and, blowing tires and whatnot.
Yeah.
But that's me. I'm now 60 years old and too old to drive fast.
Yeah, I mean, I have no doubt these people have, since experienced probably their worst day in a long time, probably on their way to work or on their way home.
Sure.
But I think
In the one case, I'm sorry, Ms. McCarter was on her way to Kroger's
Yeah.
with 3 little kids in her car. I mean, it's
frustrating.
lousy. It's
Yeah.
frustrating, but
Yeah.
that doesn't mean that the city's legally responsible for that damage.
Yeah, I agree, and that's what I'm getting at. That we need to set a precedence of reporting the potholes when you see them. If you hit them or not, you see one, report it. That way,
Absolutely.
we can then go out and fix it.
Yeah.
And like you said, many communities, or all communities, I would say, probably have a lot of potholes, and we need to work on getting ours patched. But we can't patch them unless we hear about them.
Right.
So I think that's the precedent we need to set.
Absolutely true. And what I've seen, at least from Public Works, is, when I've called in, I believe they're going out and filling them.
Yeah.
In the one instance, the Public Works employee said, "Oh, there's a crew out there already, in that area, and we can route them to the spot." Now, having said that, I didn't go out and check to see if it was exactly where this fellow, Mr. Ross, said it was. I don't know, but there are efforts to fill those darn potholes.
I understand.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I'll say too, I mean, I'd hope that in this process, whether we have the clerk ask the secretary to the clerk of council or whoever do it, but when we do get a notification of a claim for a pothole, I'm hoping that we are, and this, I don't know if this has always happened in the past, but that we are notifying Public Works that, hey, we have a claim for a pothole there. We need to make sure that pothole is now filled, because I would consider a claim us now being on notice.
The biggest
Yeah.
form of notice.
Yeah,
The easiest
yes.
form of notice.
Exactly. So just to keep that in mind too, I hope. I mean, I'm sure that feedback loop might already be happening. I'm just not sure.
Well, like I said, the first call that I made after Kevin Ross called me was to Public Works.
Okay.
First call that I made after Kelly McCarter called me was to Public Works.
Okay. Perfect.
So that, in real time, as much as I can, they're getting notified.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in the future, it'll be great if you could just do a little form and submit it without having to call. But
Yeah, and I think that's the intent. And so I guess in addition to, we'll get about I'll get to like the takeaway here, but in addition to appreciating and empathizing with the frustration, my own frustration as well too, particularly for these claims, is what do we do about that if we're kind of getting the sense that the city isn't on the hook. We still have an obligation to make better lives for our citizens, or our residents, and the best way to do that is to be looking for solutions. We have the work order process that's being thought through, and I think that there's a lot of benefits there, like we already talked about. Right now, I'll just repeat it again for residents, not just when you hit a pothole, call them. If you're seeing big holes in your street, right outside your house or where you drop kids off or something like that, call. I mean, that is the process right now that Mr. Zimmerman and our safety service director wants you to do. They're encouraging you to call them and leave a voicemail if they don't pick up right away, because they might be out repairing something. And I've talked to them. They're making a conscious effort to address those as quickly as possible for exactly this reason. They're saying to themselves, not only should we just be providing a better service, which I think is their main reason for doing it, there's also, we at City Hall, we want them to be doing that right away, because that's when there's almost that window of liability now exists in my mind. So if I report something and then 3 days later I smack it and blow a tire, well, I told you guys this was going to happen. Yeah. And that seems crystal clear for why this claims process, I imagine, would exist. Because that is the avenue for you to go, there's nothing more I could have, as a reasonable driver, done to prevent this from happening. I told you about it. I tried going slow and it still happened. City, I need you to help me out here. And then I think that or at least for me, and I think you guys too, would go, it seems like we probably are responsible. And that's not the case it sounds like, for these three.
Yeah, I
That's
don't
kind of
think so.
my takeaway.
I agree.
Okay.
I don't like being the Grinch when talking.
No,
about
it
these
doesn't
people,
sound
but,
great, but
You know, I also don't want to say, oh yeah, this is great. You know, we'll pull out our checkbook right away, and just because I can't make that assurance, especially if we haven't had notice.
in terms of that, so I guess before I go to the process side, it sounds like we've all kind of talked about what we think about these three particular claims. What's the next step typically? You've heard from us, we've provided feedback. I think if we needed to make a very clear statement of something, we would. But is that what is effective? Is that the best outcome you're trying to get when we review claims? What serves you best?
You know, my preference would be that the claimants come to this, you know,
Of course, yeah.
to the committee and say, here's my situation. And then, you know, I could respond as best I could as to what I think, you know, the situation was as to the notice or what have you. But, you know, I suppose if you're looking to make a yay or nay, you could. And then it's up to the claimant to proceed from there.
Okay.
We haven't had a lot of litigation from these things. They're hard to prove.
Yeah.
You know. And like I said, nobody wants this to happen, but we can't guarantee everybody's driving throughout the city.
Understand. I guess for you two, my question really is that do we like that process of as claims come? I think you're doing a really great job playing kind of first wave and addressing that from a legal standpoint, and then presenting them to us. Also, I like how you are, and I've seen it in some of the email traffic. You're being very clear about you should come. You should come, inviting folks to come talk to us. So that's great. In terms of process for us, do we like that? Do we want to just be continuing to see these claims as they come, and that's just part of our standing agenda, or do we want to put some thresholds and gates in there? I mean, there's 3. Maybe that's a lot. Maybe that's not. What are your thoughts?
I mean, I know we talked about before, like giving the law department a certain amount of money to say, hey, you guys handle this, and then we'll see it if it's larger than that. We didn't really talk much about what that money amount would be if we did that.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, for me, that would depend on that instead of saying, like, you know, whether it's $1,000 or $800. Hey, if it's under that, go ahead and take care of it. I'm okay with that.
What's taken care of in your mind?
Suddenly, if they think, hey, we should pay. If they think they shouldn't pay, they don't pay. And then if they want to push it further, then maybe it can come to us. So it's like a second round or second look.
Do you have anything?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. You know, I don't even know necessarily for some of these that where there's just zero, like if we do the preliminary estimates and there's zero evidence of that we would ever be liable for anything. I don't know why we would keep moving along and inviting them here and all this other stuff to, I mean, I guess the door could always be open, but I'd rather see, yes, the law department, the auditor's office, or whoever may be working together to, you know, say, hey, look, the city's just we're not going to respond to that, or we're not going to pay anything on that, and then let them know that, well, or whatever the normal thing is, but I mean, they have the right to go and take us to whichever court has the jurisdiction, and I just don't know if we want to bog this. I don't necessarily.
Yeah.
That's the big thing, and I know that I think all of us are probably on the same page there. But I mean, we could spend the last finance committee. I mean, for each one of these, the claims that we looked at specifically, we only looked at a couple of them at the time, but we spent over an hour on each one, and it was just a huge. It can turn into a big distraction. So if there's any way to just not have to have that, and to trust the elected law director and his appointed staff to take care of that, I think that would be a much better spot.
Yeah, so beyond just dollar, it'd be expected outcome. If there's a clear kind of path that they see this falling out at, then we just kind of say it's not just dollar, it's also probability of
Well, I mean,
Is there an element of probabilities that we're trying to get at?
What if we did something like, hey, they handle it up to like $800, just throwing ballpark out.
Yeah.
They handle up to $800. If they say, hey, we're not gonna process the claim. We don't think we're liable. Blah blah. Give them the option to come, but they have to come. Otherwise, we don't hear the claim. Hey, you're not here. Like Mr. Rands, for instance, law student. It's kind of hard to win a case when you don't show up to court. Whereas, he's been invited a couple times. I mean, sorry, bud.
What do you think?
I think let's put it this way. I'd appreciate the opportunity for these claimants to come talk with the committee. I have extended those offers, my preference would be that you all have some regular meetings, and I don't mean necessarily every third or second Tuesday of the month or anything like that, but some regular meetings at which these people could come and I could say, because half the time, Ms. McCarter called and said, when is the committee meeting next? And I didn't know. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't aware of this meeting at the time that I was talking to her. Mm-hmm. Then became aware of it, then invited her by, I think maybe text and email, I can't remember. And I don't know what her duties are. I think she's a mother, so that may pinch her evening hours and so on and so forth. I'd like the opportunity to be able to offer, the committee as a forum for them to come in and say their piece.
Yeah.
Without making it it doesn't have to be an hour-long circus. It's got to be, a few minutes, really.
Yeah, and I think actually, so if we did decide, maybe we could meet more often, but maybe we said for sure we're going to meet every other month on these dates, and maybe we schedule it out for the rest of the year, right, and give it to him or get whoever is going to be, taking some of these, and say, look, if you truly want to talk to the committee, RSVP, 48 hours beforehand. That way that the clerk of council can get the documents, or the assistant law director can make sure that the documents are here if they RSVP. And on those meetings, you just put a standing item that we'll review claims.
And I have no proprietary interest in actually reviewing taking these claims as intake. I don't have any problem at all with the clerk of council or the secretary to the clerk of council taking these claims and following up with Public Works. I kind of prefer that, because if it goes to litigation, I don't want to be a witness.
Okay, so, but if that were to happen, I'm just trying to think here. You're really good at being an investigator, and I know that is probably...
all you do is ask questions to try to find out, for example, where the pothole is, what happened, etc. It's not rocket science.
So for those claims under $800, then, if you weren't the one doing the initial investigation, if it were the clerk of council, the secretary to the clerk of council, and maybe, you potentially provide her, so if it's a pothole claim, this is what you do. So you document the area where it was, you call Public Works and find out if there was anything.
Right.
You find out how much her insurance deductible is,
right,
since that does play into it. Whatever the various things are.
Sure.
Was there a police report filed? And then if she goes and gets copies of all that, mm-hmm, are you going to be comfortable, is your office going to be comfortable making a decision without you having done that research? Or I guess will you just kind of lean on what's already been done and build on it?
I'm perfectly willing to rely on capable people to find facts.
Perfect. Okay. That's just what I was going to...
And if I feel like there needs to be some additional fact finding, we'll figure out how to get that done. I got to tell you, I don't relish this at all.
Yeah, it's a huge distraction to your day, I know.
Yeah,
because,
it is.
When you spend an hour or a half hour talking to these people that don't want to get off the phone until you give them their money, and...
well, and that's just not going to happen.
Oh, I know. I'm just saying, but that's I'm sure kind of in their head, they're actually talking to somebody, they don't want to give that up until...
Yeah, half the time the stuff I do is because we pick up the phone,
Yeah, and we potentially might want to ask the city administration too, what potential, do they want to have any part of this process? Do they, they may not. They might say, you know what, like, it sounds like you all have got a plan, whatever, but they might want to have the safety service director just do a quick review of, they might not though, so probably wouldn't hurt just to ask.
Yeah. So to kind of recap for the three of us, first there'll be, I think we need to do a better job. I need to do a better job of setting our meeting dates even more advanced than we already do. So I could throw some I'll maybe throw the next couple months worth of dates out to us and see if they work for us. That has a knock-on effect of allowing everyone to know when that would be. And we'll figure out where that would make sense for claims review meetings to exist. I actually am a little leaning towards there are certain claims, whether it be above threshold for dollars or above threshold for, call it circumstance. This is probably the right avenue for us to be for this committee to be listening to them. So we'll find a way to work that in, and maybe it's just certain meetings throughout the year. Then I'm also hearing that, we want to move some of the pre-investigation or fact-finding as the job of the clerk.
Or the secretary to the clerk.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right, of course. And so it's kind of like I have to obviously let Maria know and see if that is something that she wants her secretary to be doing. So I'll do that.
Yeah, and I'll just a note on that, and I really honestly don't know how the job it looks now, but in the past, I know there has been probably a little bit of capacity in that office, because one of the points of having that person is having the office open, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they've got a stack of work that they're working on all the time. In the past, I do not know though. There could be a lot of backlog stuff that I have no idea what they're working on that I didn't know needed to be done, so I don't want to make any assumptions there, but if there is opportunity for some of that, then I think that actually probably would be a good idea to honestly save. A lot of departments got so much stuff that they're doing. I think that the law department works with the clerk and the secretary of the clerk to provide, like I said, some of those guidelines. Like if it's for some of the most frequent things, potholes would probably be the most frequent, but there's probably a couple of other categories that are reasonable, kind of what that process would look like. And
like a triage sort of thing.
Yeah, and like what you do. So, and I hope that's not too complicated. I just feel like that could.
We try to work with, the mayor's office and the clerk of council's office as best we can whenever there are issues. And there have been issues since January 1 in that, how do we do this stuff?
Well, and the reason why I say that, I guess it's more to me than just verbally telling them what you do. Like, I almost kind of want to see, and I don't know who does this, like a process flow out. So that way, whether there's a new secretary of the clerk or a new clerk one day or a new law department one day, what have you, like it'd be great to have that out there. And then also, we just don't accidentally miss something, because, there's time. I'm sure in my everyday stuff, I'll forget to do a step or what have you, and it would just be nice to have it all, like I said, in some kind of a process flow if we have that capability.
Sure.
Okay, so I'll kind of follow up with Ms. Williams, and I'll keep you kind of a part of that.
That'd be
I think
great.
there is going to be I use the word triage, but yeah, like some semblance of a guideline of, because sometimes they're not always going to call. They might call you, and if they're one of the top 3 things that continue to happen, it'd be nice if you could be able to say, perfect, we kind of have a plan in place. Talk to this person for getting all the information. They can get your details. They can put this claim together, and then at least you're saving a lot of the digging hours, and you can really just save your time for, is this claim warrant a review? And if it warrants a review from you, and it still is, you know what, this really would be good if, and just using your judgment, if the committee heard this, then we bring it forward. Equally, we'll do our part of making sure there's the availability there, and we'll schedule that ahead of time with enough notice that you and any claimants could make sure that they can try to work that into their schedules.
I'm certainly willing to provide a guideline for, what to ask.
Yes. Yes.
That kind of thing.
Cool. All right, I'll
Okay.
do that, and
Great.
then I'll check with the with job safety service director and the mayor to see if they want to intervene, they feel they should intervene. I'll just find out how they feel about that, and we'll see if we need to tweak anything. It's a great. That's what I was looking to get at, this guy. So thank you to the three of you to try to help me formulate what that process should look like.
Great.
Yeah, because we don't want everything to kind of come here, but I do believe that there are times when it should, and we're just going to try to do that without bogging you down.
Thank you.
That was the aim. Any new business? Thanks for that.
What did you want to talk about item 4 though?
Oh, geez. Sorry. Yeah,
Okay.
thanks. This is going to be quick. I kind of said it when we were doing the FRP talk. We were told it was motioned that we bring the another review of the salary ranges and new position ordinance to the Finance Committee. There hasn't really been any new information, and we haven't seen what the plan's going to look like to know if that's baked in. I presume it's going to be, and I presume that we can talk about that when we look at it and see if we want to move forward. But another reading on this would have to happen after the plan.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks. So this is important, but it's also kind of like my discussion is really, we'll see what the plan says before we move forward. Your thoughts, guys?
Yeah, I mean, I think all indications are that it will be in the plan. So the positions, and I mean, the frustrating thing is that it's, I hear people, well, I won't go into that, but I will just say that the positions that they want to be added seem reasonable. It seems like a good move overall just for the management of the city. I think that even though there's, of course, nobody's seen the final plan because the final plan's not actually finalized yet. Like I said, the indications are that these will be in there.
Yep.
I don't know how much extra, and I guess we can probably talk more about this in March at a March meeting whenever finance meets if we know that the draft plan has it in there. But you're right, we can't do anything about it until the April 7th meeting, so it makes sense not to really worry too much about it at this moment.
Yeah. Well, I sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh no, for me, it's going to be baked into the plan. I'm sure it's to at least some degree, and I just really want to see, a commit before I delve into a commitment to fix some of these things we got going on in our city that aren't going away and aren't getting cheaper. I want to see a commitment to fix those things, and then kind of work this into, an effective plan that allows us to make those changes and those fixes that are necessary.
Yeah.
So, I mean...
Okay, I'll make sure that's reported back. Just so you guys know where I'm at, I was supportive of this before. The only reason I said no was because of the impacts to the current financial recovery plan and the knock-on effect with the commission. We heard their commentary. But I'm with you, James. I mean, I think that in principle, the org changes make a whole lot of sense, and I'm pretty supportive of them just personally. We'll wait. I'll just report back because we have an obligation today. Motion was to bring it here. I'll report back that we talked about it, but it was a pretty brief discussion. And I don't even think we need to say exactly where we stand now. They heard our vote, but we spoke with our vote. But we'll bring it up in April.
We're at a standstill right now.
Yep.
Any new business?
So the one item I wanted to make sure I brought up. So the city has, this accounting software. I mean, we call it eGov, right? So that essentially it's like 1995 software that helps to populate all those very archaic kind of looking reports that are out there that we get once a month emailed to us. So I know that there's some changes going on with the eGov. We're upgrading the system to a newer system. I would just recommend that we potentially find out or ensure that all the finance committee members have access to it. So I know the old system, you actually had to come into the side office at the clerk of council's office and use a city computer to access it. So you couldn't access it from home. I mean, it's all firewalled off. So anyways, long story short is I think that potentially we should look at that. I think it is helpful. I mean, the current one's very complicated, but I think the newer one is going to be much more user friendly. So if you were wanting to pull like a vendor report to know like how much have we spent with this vendor in the last 10 years or something, it should be possible now with training, of course, because at least the old one was very complicated. But anyways, just to make sure you all have access to that data, because I mean it really is our responsibility, as council members to if we know kind of things, dig in a little bit, ask questions, what have you, and I think that would probably help us out.
I'll check in with Jim, because I know he was kind of the main driver to upgrading this. So I'll check in with him about that and kind of let people know how that process for getting access would look like. So,
Gotcha. That'd be great.
Thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, and then do we want to go ahead and schedule? I don't know how how far your all's calendars go out or how far you whatever, but I wouldn't mind going ahead and scheduling at least the next meeting, and maybe we do it sometime in April to review claims. So at least so that way when people call in and they determine, and maybe you're going to do this sooner, but it'd be good for Mr. Gary to be able to, if somebody calls in tomorrow and and Mr. Gary's like, well, Finance Committee, because right now Finance Committee is still reviewing them all. It'd be good for him to at least give them a date at the time that they call.
Right.
So just curious if we want to think about scheduling that. And we can do other things at the meeting too. I mean, that could just literally be a sub-bullet at the meeting, but...
Yeah. Well, I want it to be a sub-bullet at the meeting rather than just a meeting just for claims.
Right,
That
because
sounds
we'll
not
likely...
the greatest
because
of
we'll
our
likely show up and nobody will show up and then we'll go home because if we only have one thing on the agenda.
It'd be a quick meeting.
Yep.
time. I think it's a great point. And he kind of alluded to it be that one time with Mrs. McCarter, sorry. If he had a date, he would have given it to her a lot earlier.
Yeah.
So, good point. Yeah, let's look. I know Mr. Braden's not here.
Yeah, and if we have
So-
to move it, I mean, yeah.
Well,
we'll
I'll
just consult with them, that's fine, but...
Well, first off, do Mondays and Wednesdays work for you guys?
Yes.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
just, this is pretty easy for you?
Yep.
Okay. March 16th?
So I'm likely going to be out of town that week. So, although I would come back if we had a special council meeting, I'm going to be in Louisville visiting family.
Oh,
So I'd
never mind.
rather not do
You're
it that
fine.
week. No, you're fine.
What about the 18th?
Well, I mean, same
Oh, it's the
week.
whole week you're out.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
got it. So the 24th we have. What about the 25th?
Yeah, I mean, that would be fine with me.
March 25th?
Works.
And at that point, too, we'll have so much relief because hopefully the day before
Oh,
we'll
yeah.
have passed the financial recovery plan.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
You know,
Time. Specific
like-
time.
7:30, please.
I like the 7:30 because I was able to give my baby a bath
Yeah, I was-
before coming and help put him to bed, and then that way Mama
Okay.
didn't have to do all that.
Yeah. Hate us a little less. We can do that, and then we could. I mean, April 22nd, just in keeping with the month, if we just went a month after that.
Yeah, I will be. Will I be back then? Yeah, I will still be out. I will be out of town that day.
Okay.
So I'll be out of town from.
20th?
Yeah, I'll be out of town that whole week.
Oh,
Until
that's
I'll get
the
back
week
on. I'll
that
get back
you-
on the 23rd.
I see. 27th?
Yep, I'll be back. That should work.
April 27th? Okay.
And that should be. I mean, that should be fine.
Let's say that the April 27th is the claims. We'll review claims on that one. That gives everyone, oh man, so much time to put that fact-finding and triage system in place. I can get input from the mayor and safety service director. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
You guys okay
and
with
we
that?
did. Yeah, and we didn't actually talk about like how. So I mean, I trust you to work with them and kind of decide on that triage process. And just report back to us on what kind
Yeah,
of.
it's really going to be, I'm just going to ask him, like, do you feel comfortable kind of giving him some guidance? And because I imagine there's still, if I was just the average resident, I just kind of said, I need to talk to I would call the law department
Right,
to
right.
make a claim. That would be my first person I would call. Look up their number, and I call that office. And in that case, it still is relying on Keith and Tim to have some semblance of judgment on, is this one of the big three that I just need someone to fact find, or is this funny? And it's the funnies that I imagine they need to take another. This is unusual. There's something interesting that I think requires my legal judgment. So just the fact that they're in the positions they are, there is going to be some I picked up the phone first, and so he can kind of help put some of those guidelines on what's going to get sent to the secretary, to the clerk of council. But I also just want to give Maria time to make sure that, or Mrs. Williams time to make sure that that's an okay, because I haven't checked with her. We're just kind of assuming that secretary has time.
Yeah, and the way that I'd kind of imagine it, honestly, is no matter what the claim is, I would imagine that they all, I mean, if Tim wants to ask him a few questions, if it is something that sounds interesting or different or whatever, I mean, you can, but I would imagine that he would send all of them to the secretary, clerk of council. She would have, for the specific types she would have guidance on if it's a pothole claim, take these tasks and document. If it's this type of claim, take these tasks. But if it's other claims, just take get these, details, and she would then send all of them over to, I would imagine, the law department.
Right. It's still gonna.
Yeah. But then she's at least documenting, like she's the initial intake documenting them, and then she'd copy you on that as well, so that you know what's going to the law department. The law department would make a decision and send it back to her, I would expect, and then the secretary of the clerk of council, I would think, would be the one to call the person saying, hey, we're not going to go forward with this claim, but if you want to appeal it or what have you, you can give us 48-hour notice to this specific finance committee meeting if you want to be there, and you can talk to us. I mean, that's kind of just my I'm okay if it turns out differently, but
That sort of was, not only was he okay with that, you kind of said the same thing to him. He was cool with it, and it makes sense. So
perfect.
that's likely what it will be. Any new business with you?
None.
Okay.
I'm good.
Sweet, guys. I'll try to get the report drafted in the morning and emailed out, but we can just sign it tomorrow or something like
Yeah,
that.
perfect.
Sweet.
Sounds good.
See you guys tomorrow evening.
We'll see you then.
See you.